She whispered, "Don't tell anyone." So he hid a recorder in her hair. Something's wrong with Mia. Ethan Carter never missed a school morning. Not once since the day Mia was born. It was the one routine he held on to tightly, like a lifeline. Every weekday at 7:15 a.m., he'd kneel to help his daughter tie her shoelaces, fix her pink backpack, and smooth down the flyaway strands of her hair. But lately, something had shifted. That Monday, as the early sun crept through the curtains of their modest apartment, Ethan noticed it again, something in Mia's eyes. She sat quietly at this table, cereal going soggy in front of her. Normally, she'd hum a little tune or tell him what color socks her friend Lily wore last Friday. But this morning, silence. He crouched beside her. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "you didn't even touch your breakfast. What's going on in that little mind of yours?" Mia didn't look up. Her fingers twisted around the edge of her sleeve, tight. "Do I have to go today?" Ethan blinked. Mia never asked that. She loved school, loved her art class, loved telling him about her spelling tests. "Are you feeling sick?" he asked, brushing the back of his hand to her forehead. No fever, just cold, clammy skin. Mia shook her head slowly. "No, I don't want to go." Ethan's voice stayed gentle. "Why not, baby?" Mia's eyes darted to the door, then back to the floor. "Because if I tell anyone, they'll take you away." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. "What?" he asked, voice low, heart suddenly racing. Mia's chin trembled. She still wouldn't meet his gaze. "Miss Hartley said, if I talk about what happens, they'll come take Daddy, and I won't see you again." Silence filled the room like smoke. Ethan swallowed hard. "Did she say that? Your teacher?" Mia bit her lip. "I'm not supposed to say." He knelt, gently placing a hand on her cheek. "You are safe, Mia. Nothing can take me away from you. Do you hear me?" But Mia didn't answer. She just nodded and grabbed her bag with small, trembling hands. On the way to Harmony Ridge Elementary, Ethan's mind was a whirlwind. He tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a child's confusion. But deep down, he knew better. Something had changed. Mia used to bounce in her seat, ask for the radio. That morning, she stared blankly out the window. "Do you want me to walk you in?" Ethan asked when they pulled up to the curb. She shook her head again. "I'll be okay." But her hands clenched the backpack straps like she was walking into battle. Ethan watched her small figure disappear through the school's front door. His chest tightened. He had never felt so powerless. That night, he tried to talk to her again. Mia barely touched her dinner. She flinched when the neighbor's dog barked. She asked if the front door was locked, twice. After story time, she lay in bed clutching her stuffed bear, Sparkle, so tightly its seams strained. "Daddy?" she whispered in the dark. "I'm here, baby. If something bad happens, will you still come get me?" Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "Always." She didn't say anything more. Ethan stayed awake long after Mia had fallen asleep. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was very wrong. Was it bullying? Was someone hurting her? And why would her teacher, Miss Hartley, tell her something so twisted? He barely knew the woman. All he remembered was a pair of severe glasses, a tight bun, and a reputation for being old-school strict. But now that he thought about it, Mia's fear had started after she was transferred into Miss Hartley's class 3 weeks ago. He picked up his phone, opened the parent portal. Nothing unusual, no disciplinary notes, no behavior flags, just a glowing comment. "Mia is a quiet, well-behaved student, a pleasure to have in class." It felt like a lie, a paper-thin smile covering something festering underneath. The next day, Ethan lingered by the school fence after dropping Mia off. He saw Miss Hartley then, standing outside room 1B. She greeted the children as they walked in. Her smile never touched her eyes. Ethan waited until Mia disappeared inside, then slowly turned away. As he walked home, a plan began to form. He needed proof, not just for himself, but for whoever he'd have to fight to protect Mia. That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan called his friend Caleb. "You still have that old mic set you used for recording your lectures?" "Yeah," Caleb replied. "Why?" "I need to borrow one, the smallest you've got, something that can fit in a hair clip." There was a pause, then Caleb's voice came quietly through the line. "Ethan, is this about Mia?" Ethan's silence was the only answer he could give. The clip in her hair. The next morning, Ethan woke up before sunrise. He moved through the apartment like a ghost, careful not to wake Mia. In his hand was a tiny box. Inside, a small black device the size of a dime, a long-range micro-audio recorder with voice activation. Caleb had dropped it off late the night before, with one sentence. "Whatever you find, Ethan, be ready for it." Now Ethan sat at the dining table, screwdriver in hand, carefully modifying one of Mia's sky-blue butterfly hair clips, the one she liked best. He unscrewed the center, nestled the mic inside, adjusted the wiring, then snapped it shut again. From the outside, it looked completely normal. His fingers trembled. He wasn't a man who ever believed in violating privacy, especially not his daughter's. But this wasn't about trust. It was about protection. Something was hurting Mia, and if she couldn't speak, this tiny device would. When Mia shuffled out of her room still half asleep, Ethan greeted her with a soft smile and warm toast. She barely responded. Her shoulders were hunched. Her gaze barely left the floor. "I was thinking," Ethan said casually while buttering her toast, "you should wear your butterfly clip today. The blue one. You look really pretty in it." Mia looked up hesitantly, then gave the smallest nod. Ethan helped her pin the clip into place, his hands steady, his heart not. He kissed her forehead. "There you go, princess." She stared at herself in the mirror for a moment longer than usual, then turned away without a word. The day passed like slow torture. Ethan couldn't focus on his electrical jobs. His mind kept drifting. He'd look at the time every 10 minutes, checking and rechecking the recorder's app on his phone, waiting for the file to start uploading once Mia came home. When the school bell finally rang, Ethan was already parked outside Harmony Ridge, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. Mia walked out slowly, head down. Her steps were small, like each one took effort. "Hey, sweetheart," Ethan called, stepping out of the truck. She looked up. Her face was pale. She gave him a tired, half smile and climbed into the passenger seat without a word. The ride home was silent. No radio, no conversation. Just the sound of tires on pavement and Ethan's heartbeat pounding in his ears. That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan waited exactly 10 minutes, then crept into her room like a thief in the dark. He gently unclipped the butterfly pin from her hair, trying not to disturb her. She didn't stir, just clutched her bear tighter in sleep. Back in his workshop, Ethan inserted the clip's data chip into his laptop and opened the software. A single audio file appeared on the screen. Timestamp, 6 hours, 27 minutes. He clicked play. At first, it was the harmless buzz of a classroom, children's chatter, the squeak of chairs, pencils scratching on paper. Then a door slammed. Footsteps. And then, her voice. "Miss Hartley." "All right, silence. Eyes on me." Her voice was sharp, clipped, controlled. But beneath it, there was a coldness that made Ethan's skin crawl. He heard Mia's soft voice respond to a question, barely audible. Then a pause, and then, slap. The sound was unmistakable. A gasp, a whimper, silence. Then Hartley's voice again, quiet, venomous. "Speak up when I talk to you, Mia, or are you going to be stupid like your father, too?" Ethan's hands clenched the edge of his desk. His chest tightened. He hit pause. He needed air. He stood, pacing the room, trying to keep himself from losing it. Then he returned. Hit play again. "You listen to me very carefully, little girl," Miss Hartley's voice continued, slow and deliberate. "If you ever mention what happens in this classroom to anyone, I'll tell the authorities your father hits you. I'll say he's unfit. You'll be taken away and put somewhere where no one loves you. Understand?" There was a pause. Then a whisper. "Yes, Miss Hartley." Ethan dropped his head into his hands. Tears burned at the edges of his eyes. But it wasn't sorrow, it was rage, pure, blinding rage. That night, he couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment for hours. Over and over, he replayed the voice in his head, the tone, the threat. Mia had been carrying this, alone, for weeks, and all the while he'd been packing her lunch, waving her off with a smile, sending her into that nightmare. At 4:03 a.m., Ethan called Caleb. "Can you come over? Now." Caleb arrived 15 minutes later. He listened to the recording without a word. When it ended, he looked up, face pale. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet," Ethan replied, "but I'm not letting that woman near my daughter again." He leaned forward. "I need to make this public. Someone has to help me expose her." Caleb hesitated, then offered a name. You remember Ryan Brooks, that investigative reporter you rewired a fuse box for last summer? Ethan blinked. Yeah, you think he'd listen? He owes you a favor, and he loves taking down crooked systems. Later that morning, Ethan called Mia's school and reported that she was under the weather and would stay home. He didn't want her stepping foot in that building until he had a plan. She sat on the couch in her pajamas watching cartoons, but Ethan noticed. Her eyes still flicked toward the front door now and then, like she expected someone to burst in. "Daddy?" she said softly as he tucked a blanket around her. "Yes, baby." "Did I do something wrong?" Ethan's throat clenched. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Grown-ups sometimes lie when they want to protect themselves, but that doesn't mean we believe them." Mia looked down. "Miss Hartley said you'd be taken away." Ethan gently lifted her chin until their eyes met. "I will never let anyone take me away from you. Not ever." Mia stared at him for a long second, then slowly nodded. That afternoon, Ryan Brooks returned Ethan's call. "You said it's about a teacher threatening your daughter?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice taut. "And I have audio proof." He sent over the file. 10 minutes later, Ryan called back. His voice had changed. Now it was sharp, alert. "I'm coming over," he said. Ryan Brooks looked exactly like Ethan remembered. Disheveled hair, a scuffed leather satchel, and a camera always slung over one shoulder. He listened to the full recording, taking notes in silence. Then he asked 100 questions. When did Mia transfer into Hartley's class? Any prior warning signs? Did she ever mention other kids being treated the same? "She's scared to talk," Ethan said. "But something tells me she's not the only one." Ryan closed his notebook and leaned forward. "This isn't just a story. This is systemic abuse, covered up. We need more than one recording. We need patterns, witnesses, parents." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll find." That night, as Mia finally fell asleep with Sparkle in her arms and her breathing soft and steady, Ethan stepped outside to the balcony. The stars were faint. The city was quiet. He looked up, then whispered to himself, "This ends now." Whispers in the hallway. Ethan hadn't been able to sleep properly since the night he listened to the recording hidden in Mia's hair clip. Miss Hartley's voice still echoed in his mind, sharp, cold, and cruel. Every word felt like a splinter under his skin, and yet what haunted him most was Mia's silence. She hadn't said a word about what had happened. Every morning she'd hold his hand a little too tightly at drop-off, and every afternoon she'd rush out of the building like she couldn't wait to leave. Her smile, the one that used to light up the car when she saw him, was gone. Something inside her had dimmed, and Ethan couldn't stand it. That Friday he called in sick to work. He told Mia it was a daddy day off, and packed her lunchbox a little more carefully than usual. After she left, backpack bouncing against her tiny shoulders, he followed at a distance and parked his truck a block away from Harmony Ridge Elementary. He had no plan, just instincts and desperation. He sat there for hours, watching kids play at recess, scanning the windows, the doors, the faces of teachers and staff. It looked like any ordinary school. Laughter, sneakers squeaking, backpacks swinging. But Ethan knew now that appearances meant nothing. When the recess bell rang, he noticed a small group of kids sitting under the jungle gym, half hidden by the wooden slats. He cracked the window slightly, just enough to hear. 2 boys, maybe second grade, were whispering fast and low. "Did you hear what happened to Ava today?" "She got sent to room 204. "Oh man, that's bad. Jordan cried for like hours last time. I heard she keeps a stick in her desk." "Don't say that. If she hears you, you'll be next." Room 204. The number hit Ethan like a bolt. That was Mia's classroom, Miss Hartley's domain, the place she returned from each day quieter than the last. He felt his heart sink lower into his chest. He clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white. Later that evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan sat in the living room scrolling through the school's parent app. He didn't know many other parents. As a single dad who worked long hours, he rarely made it to the PTA events or school functions. But there was one name he remembered, Naomi Alvarez. Her son, Matthias, was in Mia's class. Ethan had seen Naomi during pickups, always watching Matthias closely, her brows knit in concern more often than not. He hesitated, then typed, "Hi, Naomi. This is Ethan, Mia's dad. I know this is unusual, but something's wrong at school. Could we talk?" The reply came an hour later. "I was hoping someone would say something. Meet me tomorrow at Becker's Cafe, 10 a.m. The next morning, Ethan arrived early. Becker's cafe smelled like burnt cinnamon rolls and strong coffee. Naomi walked in right on time, dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed tight. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "It's Hartley, isn't it?" she said. Ethan nodded. Naomi's voice trembled slightly. "Matthias has been wetting the bed. He used to be so confident, but lately he cries before school. Says if he talks, she'll find out." She looked away, blinking fast. "I didn't know who to tell." Ethan swallowed hard. "Mia's been terrified too. I hid a recorder in her hair clip." Naomi looked up, stunned. Ethan pulled out his phone and played a 30-second snippet. Miss Hartley's voice filled the space between them, chilling and sharp. Naomi covered her mouth with one hand. "That monster," she whispered. "There's more," Ethan said. "I think some kids know. I heard them whispering about room 204. Naomi nodded. "You're not the first parent to worry. I remember one mom, Catherine Lee. She pulled her son Brandon out mid-year. Just disappeared. Wouldn't answer any questions." Ethan's heart kicked. He asked if Naomi had a way to contact her. She checked an old PTA email thread and scribbled down Catherine's address. "Try writing her," she said. "If something happened to her boy, she deserves to know she's not alone." That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a pen in one hand and a trembling heart in the other. He wrote a short, honest letter. "Dear Catherine, I'm a parent at Harmony Ridge. My daughter Mia is in room 204. I believe something is very wrong. I've heard things, recorded things. If you've experienced anything, I'd be grateful to hear from you. You're not alone anymore. Ethan Carter." He dropped the letter in the mailbox at dawn. The next afternoon his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A soft, cautious voice spoke. "Mr. Carter, this is Catherine Lee. I got your letter. I've been waiting for someone to ask." Ethan's breath caught. "My son still wakes up screaming some nights," Catherine continued. "He's been in therapy ever since. I thought I was crazy. Everyone told me to keep quiet. But if what you're saying is true, maybe it's time someone finally listened." Ethan closed his eyes, emotion catching in his throat. "You're not crazy," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." And as the call ended, Ethan knew he had cracked something open, a wall of silence that had stood too long. Something was happening in room 204, and it had left scars on more than just Mia. He was no longer just a concerned father. He was a man with proof, with allies, and with a growing determination to bring it all into the light, no matter the cost. A visit to the principal. Ethan stood in the school's front office, his jaw tight, one hand clenched into a fist in his jacket pocket. The audio file he had copied from Mia's hair clip still rang in his ears. Miss Hartley's cold, manipulative voice, the fear trembling in Mia's replies. Every second of that recording had broken something inside him, replaced by a rage he didn't know he could feel. He looked at the secretary behind the desk. "I need to speak to Principal Monroe. It's urgent. It's about my daughter." The woman gave a polite, practiced smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ethan replied flatly. "But I think when you hear what this is about, you'll want to let him know I'm not leaving until I see him." There was something in his tone that made her pause. She nodded slightly, picked up the phone, and spoke in a hushed voice. A few minutes later, Ethan was sitting stiffly across from Principal Monroe, a tall man in his early 60s with a polished suit and a tired, distant expression. His office smelled faintly of leather and lemon polish. Family photos lined the bookshelves. A school motto plaque hung above the door, "Excellence through discipline." "I understand you have a concern about your daughter?" Monroe asked, steepling his fingers. Ethan didn't waste a second. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, then tapped play. Miss Hartley's voice filled the room. "You know what happens when little girls tattle, Mia?" Monroe flinched, but only slightly. He reached across the desk and paused the recording before it played more than 20 seconds. "This is not something that should have been recorded, Mr. Carter," Monroe said calmly, too calmly. "That's your takeaway?" Ethan snapped. "Not the fact that your teacher is threatening a 7-year-old child in your school?" Monroe folded his hands. "Mr. Carter, we take all complaints seriously, but I would caution you against jumping to conclusions based on one recording, especially one obtained without the school's consent." Ethan stood. "I'm not here to debate privacy. I'm here because my daughter is terrified to come to school. She has nightmares. She thinks that if she tells the truth, someone will take me away. That's not normal. That's not okay. Principal Monroe exhaled through his nose, then leaned back in his chair. Let me be very clear. If you truly believe something inappropriate is happening, there are proper channels. You can submit a written complaint to the district board, but I suggest you tread carefully. False accusations can damage reputations, yours included. Ethan stared at him. He suddenly realized what Monroe wasn't saying, that he already knew, that this wasn't news, that Miss Hartley had done this before, and someone like Monroe had looked away. He left the office with his heart hammering. He knew what he had to do, make a formal complaint, official, documented. He'd take it to the district if needed. He wasn't going to back down. But 2 days later, someone came knocking on his door. It was 8:30 a.m. Ethan was making pancakes for Mia when the knock came. Firm, sharp, too official. He opened the door and immediately felt his stomach twist. 2 individuals in crisp business attire stood outside, a man and a woman. "Mr. Ethan Carter?" the woman asked. She held up a badge. "I'm with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report concerning possible abuse of your daughter." Mia, barefoot, peeked out from behind her father's leg. Ethan blinked. "What?" "It's standard procedure, sir," the man said. "We'll need to ask you a few questions, separately." Mia's eyes widened with panic. "Daddy?" Ethan knelt beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go to your room for a bit. I'll come get you in a few minutes." She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The woman stepped inside. "We've received information suggesting Mia may be experiencing emotional trauma at home, possibly due to parental stress or aggression." "That's ridiculous," Ethan snapped. She's afraid of someone at school, not me. Do you have any documentation of that?" "I have a recording from her teacher." The man narrowed his eyes. "Was this recording obtained with the school's permission?" Ethan didn't answer. The woman jotted something down. "Mr. Carter, I need to be honest with you. Unlawful surveillance, especially involving minors, is a serious matter. Depending on how this proceeds, it could impact custody." A chill passed over Ethan like a shadow. It hit him then. This wasn't a coincidence. The timing, the phrasing, the accusations, someone had gotten to them. Someone was trying to discredit him, to scare him into silence. He kept his answers short, careful. He let them inspect Mia's room. He answered every question. When they finally left, hours later, they promised to follow up within a week. The moment the door closed, Ethan slid down the wall, his head in his hands. They weren't just ignoring the abuse. They were protecting it. And now they were coming for him. That night, long after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan sat in the dark with his laptop open. The screen glowed with a half-written email to the school district, but his fingers hovered over the keyboard, motionless. He needed help, not just from another parent, not just from a complaint form, from someone who wasn't afraid to fight back. He opened a browser window and searched. Investigative journalist plus school abuse plus whistleblower. One name came up again and again. Ryan Brooks. And just beneath that, he found something else. A local news clip, only 2 years old. Ryan, standing outside a school board hearing, holding a microphone. His voice calm, direct. "When you silence children, you don't just protect abusers, you punish innocents. And that's not justice." Ethan stared at the screen. Then he picked up his phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the article. It rang once, twice, then, "This is Brooks." Ethan cleared his throat. "My name is Ethan Carter. I think my daughter's teacher is hurting kids, and someone is trying to cover it up." The journalist and the cop. The morning after Ethan received the visit from Child Protective Services, the house still echoed with the sting of humiliation. The memory of that cold knock at his door, the clipboard in the agent's hand, the way Mia clung to his leg as if he might be ripped from her at any moment, none of it would leave him. He knew now, without a doubt, that he was fighting something much bigger than one cruel teacher. As he sipped bitter coffee and stared blankly at the news on TV, a headline scrolled across the screen. "Whistleblower exposes abuse cover-up in county school district." A name caught his eye. Ryan Brooks. He'd heard that name before. A freelance journalist who'd made a career out of uncovering uncomfortable truths, especially in schools, hospitals, and government programs. Ryan didn't chase clicks. He chased justice. Ethan opened his laptop, typed the name into the search bar, and within minutes found Ryan's official site. It wasn't flashy, just clean, black text on white, with links to articles and a discreet contact form. Ethan hesitated for just a second before writing. My daughter is 7. She's scared to go to school. I have proof her teacher is threatening her. And now I've been falsely accused of abuse. They want me to back off. But I won't. Ethan Carter. He hit send. An hour later, his phone rang. Ethan? The voice was direct, calm, and strangely reassuring. Ryan Brooks, you said you had proof. I'd like to see it. They met at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, far from Harmony Ridge Elementary. Ethan wore a baseball cap low over his eyes. Ryan showed up in a gray hoodie and jeans, with a worn leather messenger bag slung across his shoulder. His eyes, sharp and attentive, immediately fixed on Ethan. You brought the clip? Ryan asked. Ethan nodded and slid a flash drive across the table. Audio's from her hair clip. I planted it when Mia started acting strange. She said if she told me what was happening, they'd take me away. Ryan plugged the flash drive into a small device. He put in earbuds, listened in silence. Then he pulled them out slowly. Jesus, Ethan exhaled. That woman, Hartley, she's not just abusive. She's manipulative. This is psychological warfare on a child. Ryan's voice trembled slightly. This isn't the first time I've heard a teacher talk like this, but it's the first time I've had it on tape. What do we do? Ethan asked. Ryan looked at him serious. We go to the police, but not just any cop. I know someone who won't be bought. Detective Laura Price met them that evening in a quiet parking lot outside the city library. She wore plain clothes, but the badge clipped to her belt gleamed beneath the light of the setting sun. Her demeanor was brisk, but not cold. Ryan introduced them. Laura, this is Ethan Carter. He's the one with the case. Laura extended her hand. I've read your message, heard the clip. She glanced down at the file folder Ethan had brought. Tell me everything you know. No edits. Ethan spoke for nearly an hour. About Mia's change in behavior, about the clip, the recording, the cryptic warning from the principal, and the child services visit. About how the school had closed ranks the moment he started asking questions. Laura took notes. She didn't interrupt, except to ask for clarifications. When Ethan finished, she sat still for a long moment. There's something rotten here, she said finally. And it didn't start with your daughter. You said Principal Monroe brushed you off? Ethan nodded. He acted like I was paranoid. I've seen that face before. It's the face of someone who knows something and doesn't want to be caught. Laura looked to Ryan. We need to find a pattern. Ryan nodded. Leave that to me. If there are other complaints, I'll find them. Public records, archived reports, maybe even redacted letters. Most people don't dig that far, but I do. Laura leaned forward. And Ethan, you stay quiet. Don't confront Hartley. Don't go near the school unless absolutely necessary. From this moment forward, we do this by the book. They can't bury us if we shine enough light. The next week was a blur of shadows and whispers. While Ethan focused on caring for Mia and keeping up the appearance of normal life, Ryan went to work in silence. He filed FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, interviewed anonymous sources, and followed digital trails through parent forums and archived news clippings. And he found something. 3 cases, 3 families, over the last 5 years. Each had filed complaints, anonymous, redacted, buried, all against Hartley. One had accused her of emotional coercion. Another said their child begged not to go to school every day for months. The third had left town, no trace, moved without a forwarding address after a public argument with school administrators. Ryan met with Laura at the precinct. They were silenced. The reports were filed but never investigated. Someone redacted the details before they hit the district office. Laura's eyes narrowed. That's a violation of protocol. And if Monroe was involved, we're dealing with obstruction of justice. She looked over the documents. We need more. Ryan nodded. I have an idea. That night, Ethan found himself staring at the stars through Mia's bedroom window. She was asleep, finally, curled into her favorite blanket. He gently smoothed her hair back from her forehead and whispered, I'm going to fix this, baby girl. I promise. Then his phone buzzed. It was Ryan. Meet me tomorrow morning. I found something. And it's big. They met in Ryan's cluttered apartment, where the walls were lined with case files and storyboards. Ryan handed Ethan a photocopy of a personnel record. Hartley was suspended 10 years ago, he said, for inappropriate language and discipline tactics involving a second-grade student. It was meant to be a permanent dismissal. Ethan read the page, his hands trembling. But, Ryan pointed to a second page. 6 months later, reinstated. The signature on the reinstatement form? Monroe. Ethan's blood ran cold. She should never have come back. And yet, Ryan said, she did. And now, she's targeting your daughter, and God knows how many others. Laura, who had just walked in, nodded grimly. This is it. With this, the audio, and the prior complaints, we have enough to open a formal investigation. But it gets better. She dropped a sealed envelope onto the table. That's a court-approved warrant. I'll be interviewing Monroe and Hartley, and this time, they don't get to hide. Ethan's heart pounded. Will it be enough? Laura looked him in the eye. If not, I'll make it enough. The secret files. The hallway was dark and silent, except for the occasional hum of a security camera sweeping back and forth. Ryan stood motionless near the end of the corridor, holding his breath. His pulse beat in his ears like a war drum. He had done a lot of risky things in his career, but breaking into the school board's off-site records facility at 3 a.m. was definitely top 3. His source, a former administrative assistant with a grudge, had whispered a name into his ear 2 nights ago, Room 7B, District Storage. That was where sensitive personnel files were sent to disappear. Redacted, forgotten, cleaned. Find 7B, she had said, and look for anything marked Hartley Eleanor. You'll know it when you see it. Now here he was. He moved quietly down the hallway, past shelves lined with cardboard boxes, each tagged with years and categories. 7B wasn't a room. It was a deep storage archive. He flicked on the flashlight strapped to his chest and scanned labels. Hartley, E-file number 2201 EDHR17. Gotcha. He pulled the box off the shelf. Inside was a manila folder, thicker than most. A red tag stuck out. Flagged. Do not release without district supervision. Ryan's mouth went dry. He flipped it open. The first document was a formal reprimand from 2013. Use of inappropriate discipline tactics. Subjecting student to verbal degradation and prolonged isolation in a janitor's closet. The victim was a 6-year-old girl named Kayla Monroe. Ryan blinked. Monroe? The surname matched the current principal. A coincidence? He flipped to the next page. Attached was a letter written in trembling childlike handwriting, scanned and kept on file. A drawing of a girl crying behind a closed door. Below it the words, "Please don't make me go back to room 204. Ryan sat down on the floor. Room 204, the room the kids at Harmony Ridge whispered about. The next page was an internal memo from the school board's ethics committee. Recommended termination of employment, Ms. Eleanor Hartley. Behavior constitutes psychological abuse. Immediate removal advised. But it never happened. Why? The next file held the answer. A typed letter from then Vice Principal George Monroe requesting reconsideration of Hartley's termination, citing her long-standing record of excellence and a single regrettable lapse under stress. He called it an internal matter that should not reflect her future employability. Ryan closed his eyes and exhaled sharply. Monroe had protected her, and now he was her boss. He took pictures of every page, time-stamped and backed up onto the cloud. He wasn't leaving anything to chance. When he finally stepped back outside, the sky was starting to lighten with the first pale colors of morning. The truth had a face now, and it was a familiar one. At the same time, Ethan stood in the kitchen, absent-mindedly packing Mia's lunch. His hands moved through the motions, but his mind wasn't there. Mia sat at the table, tracing tiny stars in the condensation of her juice glass. She still hadn't smiled in days. The silence between them had grown into a shadow that lingered in every room. Then she whispered, "Is it okay to be scared, Daddy?" Ethan turned, startled by her voice. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, gently kneeling beside her. "It's okay. Even grown-ups get scared." She nodded, eyes down. "I miss how school used to feel." Ethan swallowed a lump in his throat. "Me too." Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. "I have the file. Monroe covered up Hartley's abuse 10 years ago. It's all in writing. Meet me. We're blowing this wide open." They met in Laura's office. Ryan spread out the printed pages, documents, and photos like puzzle pieces. "She should have been fired a decade ago," he said. "Instead, Monroe protected her, and now she's back, doing it all over again, with the same tools, the same room." Laura's jaw tightened as she scanned the reports. These weren't just mistakes, they were choices. He covered this up. He let her near kids again. Ethan felt the familiar wave of anger rise in his chest, but now it had clarity. Focus. She used a janitor's closet for punishment? He asked quietly. To isolate a 6-year-old? Ryan nodded. That girl, Kayla Monroe, was the principal's niece. That's the real reason he kept it quiet. So he could protect his own family, Laura said bitterly, while sacrificing everyone else's. She slammed the folder shut. It ends now. That afternoon, Ethan picked up Mia early from school. They didn't speak on the ride home. She held his hand tightly the whole way. At home, she curled up with her favorite book on the couch. Ethan sat nearby, phone in hand, waiting for Laura's update. It came just after 6 p.m. The file's been verified. We're submitting to the DA. Tomorrow we question Hartley and Monroe under recorded statement. It's happening. Ethan looked over at Mia. Her eyes were already closed. He whispered, "One more day, baby girl, just one more day." Meanwhile, Principal Monroe sat alone in his office, staring at an email forwarded from Central Administration. Subject line, Investigative Inquiry into Personnel File, Hartley, E. He wiped sweat from his brow, then picked up the phone. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "We have a problem." That night, Ryan uploaded an anonymous post to a private investigative journalism forum, attaching redacted versions of the files he'd found. Within minutes, dozens of other reporters were messaging him, asking for more, asking if this was real. He typed, "It's very real, and this time, they won't be able to bury it." Back at the Carter house, Ethan sat by Mia's bed, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in what felt like months. He reached down, gently touched her hair, and whispered, "You were right to be scared, but I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Outside the window, thunder rumbled on the horizon. But for the first time, Ethan wasn't afraid of the storm. The interview that changed everything. Ethan woke up that morning with a feeling he couldn't quite describe. It wasn't fear exactly. It was heavier, sharper. It was the weight of knowing that today, his little girl would have to say out loud the things she'd only dared to whisper in her sleep. The sun hadn't yet fully risen, but the sky outside their small kitchen window was beginning to pale. Ethan stood silently, stirring a mug of coffee he had no intention of drinking. In the next room, Mia was still asleep, curled beneath her favorite blanket, the one with stars and moons on it. She looked peaceful, but he knew the battle inside her hadn't quieted. Today was the day of the interview, with both a child psychologist and Detective Laura present. It wasn't going to be just about justice. It was about helping Mia reclaim her voice. But that didn't make it any easier. He had spent most of the night sitting on the couch, watching old videos of Mia laughing at the zoo, dancing in her princess costume, making faces at pancakes, back when her eyes sparkled without shadows. When Mia finally woke up, she walked slowly into the kitchen. Her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, was clutched tightly to her chest. Her steps were unsure. Ethan knelt down beside her. "Morning, sweetheart," he said softly. Mia looked up at him, a small frown etched on her face. "Is it today?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Only if you're ready." There was a pause. "Will they believe me?" He took her hand gently. "They will. And if they don't, I'll make sure they do." They sat in silence for a while, eating breakfast slowly. Mia picked at her cereal. When it was time to leave, she put on her blue dress, the one she called her brave dress. Ethan tucked Mr. Buttons into her backpack, just in case. As they drove to the center, Mia stared out the window, silent at first. Then, just a few blocks away, her voice wavered. "Daddy, what if she gets mad I told?" Ethan reached across and gently squeezed her hand. "She doesn't get to scare you anymore. She already took too much from you, sweet pea. Today, we start getting it back." But her breathing had gotten shallow. Her tiny hands clenched. Tears brimmed at the edge of her eyes. "I feel funny inside," she whispered. Ethan pulled over, turned to face her. "It's okay to be scared. Do you want to wait another day?" Mia hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but can you tell me again why we're doing this?" And that's when Ethan told her something he hadn't shared before. "You're not the only one, Mia," he said quietly. "There are other kids, some who went through the same thing, some who never got to speak up. They're still scared, still hurting. But if you talk today, maybe they'll find the courage to talk too." Mia stared at him. "They need someone brave," Ethan continued, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Someone like you." For a moment her lips quivered, then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll be brave for them." The interview room at the center was warm and softly lit. Detective Laura Price was already inside, along with Dr. Emily Rhodes, a child trauma specialist who had years of experience helping children open up safely. They greeted Mia gently, offering her crayons, paper, and a juice box. Mia sat down hesitantly, clutching Mr. Buttons. Ethan watched through the one-way mirror, hands clasped tight, heart pounding in his chest. Dr. Rhodes began with light questions. Favorite color, best friend. Her favorite cartoon character. Mia answered with quiet, short phrases. Then slowly the questions turned. Do you remember when you stopped liking school? Dr. Rhodes asked softly. Mia stared at the paper in front of her. She didn't answer right away. Then she drew a circle. And inside it, she drew a smaller circle with a sad face. That was me, she whispered. In the room. Laura and Dr. Rhodes exchanged a glance. What room, sweetheart? Room 204. The name hit Ethan like a stone. It was real. It wasn't just whispers. The room was real. Mia continued haltingly at first, then with more clarity than anyone expected. She made me stay in there, alone, with the lights off. Who did? Miss Hartley. She said it's where bad girls go. Mia's voice trembled. She told me if I told anyone, she'd say I lied, that Daddy would get in trouble, that they'd take me away. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He wanted to run in, to hold her. But he knew she was doing something even stronger than anything he could do. She was speaking her truth. She said, I didn't smile right, that I was creepy. She said I made the other kids nervous, that I didn't deserve recess. And did anyone else see this? Mia hesitated. Sometimes, but she told them not to talk about it. I saw her do it to Jared, too. And Olivia. Jared cried really bad. Ethan's heart clenched. Jared, the boy who moved away. Olivia, the girl who stopped talking in class. She said she liked when we were quiet, said quiet kids were smarter, but it just made me feel gone. Mia dropped her crayon. She looked up. But I don't want to be gone anymore. When the interview ended, Dr. Rhodes walked out to where Ethan stood. Her eyes were misty. She's incredible, she said. She's still scared, but she's stronger than you think. Ethan stepped in as Mia came out. He dropped to his knees and wrapped her in a long, quiet hug. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. I told the truth, she said. I want the other kids to feel safe, like me now. That night, Laura and Ethan filed the full report, with transcript and recording of Mia's interview, corroborated by the earlier clip and Ryan's documents. It was more than a complaint now. It was evidence. It was undeniable. Ryan Brooks, the journalist, prepared his story. The headline would read, Silence behind the classroom door, what one little girl finally exposed. He interviewed Ethan in their small kitchen, Mia sitting quietly nearby, doodling stars and flowers. Are you ready for this to go public? Ryan asked. Ethan nodded. If it helps even one other child, then yes. Across town at Harmony Ridge Elementary, murmurs had begun. Rumors, glances. Something was unraveling. Monroe sensed it. So did Hartley. But they didn't know the full storm was only just beginning. That night before bed, Mia turned to Ethan. Daddy? Yes, Sweet Pea? I think I want to go back to school someday, when the scary people are gone. Ethan swallowed hard. They will be, I promise. And I want to help other kids not be scared anymore. Like, be a helper. Ethan smiled through tears. You already are, Mia. She climbed into bed, wrapped in her starry blanket. Outside her window, the night was quiet, but not the heavy kind of silence that used to haunt her dreams. This was a peaceful quiet, a waiting kind of quiet, because tomorrow the truth would be louder than it had ever been. You'll never hurt her again. Ethan sat in the dimly lit living room that night, the silence around him thick and suffocating. Mia had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past days. Her breathing was steady, but Ethan could still hear the remnants of her fear in the quiet. It had been a long road for both of them, but he knew, no matter what, he would always fight to protect her. As he stared at the flickering light of the fireplace, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. The world around them seemed to be shifting in response to the truth Mia had bravely shared. They had exposed the lies, and now it was time for those responsible to face the consequences. The following morning, Ethan received a call from Detective Laura Price. Her voice was calm but filled with urgency. Ethan, we've got news. We've officially charged Miss Hartley with child abuse and misconduct. The police are moving forward with an investigation into Principal Monroe's involvement in the cover-up. Ethan's heart raced. He hadn't dared to believe it would come to this, that the system would finally crack and expose the darkness hiding behind it. For so long, he had lived in fear that the power of those in charge would protect the guilty. But now, justice was on their side. And there's more, Laura continued. The investigation is gaining traction. We've spoken to more families, and they're coming forward with their own stories. This is just the beginning. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over him like a wave. It was happening. He could hardly believe it. "Thank you, Laura," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been an incredible ally." She paused before replying. "We all have a role in this. You and Mia were the spark. We just gave it a push." Later that day, a press conference was held. Ryan Brooks, the journalist who had tirelessly helped uncover the truth, was there to present the story to the public. Ethan sat quietly in the back, his hands resting on the seat in front of him. Mia was at home, surrounded by comfort, no longer burdened by the fear that had once gripped her heart. Ryan stepped up to the podium, his voice steady and strong. "Today, we begin to shed light on the dark truth that has been hidden within the walls of Harmony Ridge Elementary. Through the bravery of one young girl, Mia Carter, we have uncovered a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and neglect that has gone unnoticed for far too long." Ryan continued, outlining the full scope of the investigation. The voices of other parents, teachers, and children were now being heard. Their stories of harassment and mistreatment, their courage in standing up for what was right, it was all coming together. The truth could no longer be ignored. At the same time, Principal Monroe was under intense scrutiny. News outlets were covering the investigation, and soon the pressure from the public became too great for him to handle. The once untouchable figure was now on the defense. The school board demanded answers. He could no longer hide behind the authority he had so often abused. Ethan watched the reports unfold on the news. There was a strange sense of satisfaction in seeing Monroe finally squirm, but it didn't fill the hole in his chest. The damage had been done. The lives that had been altered forever. The children who had been scarred. No amount of justice could change that. But it was a start, and it was more than they had ever had before. As the days passed, the investigation into Miss Hartley's actions expanded. New evidence surfaced, and more families stepped forward with testimonies. Ethan made sure to stay involved every step of the way, talking to witnesses, meeting with Detective Laura and Ryan. He wasn't going to let up until every truth had been exposed, until those responsible faced the consequences of their actions. Then, one afternoon, Ethan received a call from the authorities. They had arrested Miss Hartley. She was being taken into custody, charged with multiple counts of child abuse, emotional and physical mistreatment, and blackmailing the children she was supposed to protect. A small part of Ethan felt relief. For so long, he had wondered if he would ever see her face the consequences of what she had done to Mia, to the other children. But another part of him couldn't help but feel the weight of the years that had been stolen from Mia. The fear she had carried, the pain she had silently endured, all of it was more than any punishment could undo. At the same time, the investigation into Principal Monroe was heating up. Evidence revealed that he had knowingly covered up Miss Hartley's behavior, protecting her when he should have been holding her accountable. The corruption within the school system was becoming more apparent with every passing day. For the first time in years, the truth was finally in the open. The parents who had been too afraid to speak out before were now rallying together. The community was beginning to stand up for the children who had been silenced for so long. And then, a breakthrough. A public statement was made by the school board. Principal Monroe was suspended, pending a full investigation. His career was over. The school board's decision was just the beginning. As news outlets continued to report on the story, the investigation went viral. The pressure continued to mount. The school district had no choice but to release an official statement. "We deeply regret the failure to properly protect the children under our care. We are committed to transparency, accountability, and justice for the victims." It was a hollow apology, but it was something. And for Ethan, it was a sign that they weren't finished. He knew there would be more battles ahead, but they had won this one. Weeks later, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Mia, surrounded by the people who loved her, stood before a courtroom. She was brave, stronger than she ever knew she could be. Ethan sat beside her, holding her hand. Together, they had come a long way from the frightened, silent girl he had once held in his arms. Miss Hartley and Principal Monroe both faced serious charges. The case was far from over, but the path to justice was now clear. Mia had spoken, and the world was listening. As the case progressed, more changes were made within the school system. Harmony Ridge Elementary was undergoing a complete overhaul. New leadership was brought in. Teachers were trained in recognizing and preventing abuse. The culture of silence was slowly being dismantled. Mia, now slowly starting to trust again, began attending a new school. The transition wasn't easy, but with Ethan by her side, she knew she was safe. Every night before bed, Ethan would tell her the same thing. "You're stronger than you know. No one can take that away from you." And Mia would smile, a little more brightly each time. The darkness that had hung over them was fading, replaced by the light of hope and justice. Ethan's phone buzzed late one evening. It was a message from Detective Laura Price. "The case is closed. Miss Hartley and Monroe will face trial. The system has been changed, Ethan. You did it. Mia did it." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining. He looked over at Mia, who was snuggled up in her favorite blanket, her little teddy bear beside her. The road ahead wasn't easy, but they had made it this far. And no matter what came next, Ethan knew one thing for sure. No one would ever hurt Mia again. No child should ever feel afraid to speak the truth. No love is stronger than a parent's fight to protect their child's voice. Let's always stand together to make sure no one, especially our children, are ever silenced again.